Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmommy.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some tips on how to homeschool history with living books. And I have to point out right from the very beginning that there are literally dozens of ways that you can homeschool history with living books. What I'm going to share with you today are some ideas that we have already used in our homeschool that you might want to use in yours, or even just some ideas that I might have not personally used but that I have thought of possibly using in the future. So just keep in mind that this is just maybe to give you a starting point on things that you can incorporate into your homeschool until you kind of work your own methods into it. So to start out, I actually have some different examples of living books that have to do with history right here, just so that I can first of all describe to you the different types of living books there are. Now, first of all, there are biographies and autobiographies. A second type are true stories that are written more as fiction. These would be considered historical fiction very often. There are trade books. And there are even books that have to do with folklore of different areas of the world. So that gives you just a little glimpse into the different types of living books there are, because whatever you find at the library is pretty much a living book to me. The only things that I would really not consider to be living books are really textbooks and sometimes even encyclopedias, just because of the way that they're written. They're written kind of more just to get information across, but there's nothing really to make it interesting. So that's how I define a living book. So most of the time, if you go to the library, you have a really good chance. You have a fantastic chance of getting some good living books for your kids. So the first very, very obvious and the most basic way that you can homeschool history with living books in your homeschool is just to read them to your kids, or to just have your kids read them to themselves. I think that a lot of times we homeschooling parents think that we have to make everything look like school lessons. We kind of push aside the notion that you can just read to your kids and that it will somehow be enough. We always think that we have to add something extra to it, give a little oomph to it. But if you think about it, you as the adult, when you want to know something, especially if you are a reader, since we're talking about books, but if you want to know something, how do you go about getting that information? When I want to know something, very often I will get a book on the subject and I will read it. I don't add little hands-on activities for myself. I don't do unit studies. I don't come up with lessons for myself. I read. That's plain and simple. I read it, and that is how I gain all of the information. Now, a lot of times I will jot down some ideas that I think are useful or that I want to remember. But for the main part of learning as an adult, reading is plenty. And I think that sometimes we forget that that can be the same way with kids too. You can honestly sit down and just read to your kids every day, and they will gain so much knowledge, especially if you are reading to them about a topic that they particularly have an interest in. So I just want to I want you to keep that in mind, especially if you are a mother of many and you have a lot going on in your homeschool like I do. Or sometimes you might have a new baby in the house, or you might have a toddler who's constantly getting into things as you are trying to homeschool your kids. I just want to give you that encouragement that sitting down and just reading through a book with your kids is enough. So even like reading Farmer Boy. Years ago, I was reading the Little House series with my kids, and after we were done reading it, they would go out in the yard and they would reenact some of the scenes. They would be pretending to churn butter. They actually asked me to help them figure out how we could churn butter at home. And we found a really neat book that did describe to us how we could churn butter. What else were they doing? They wanted to make molasses snow candy. So we did that. And that all came about because they loved the book so much that they were interested in doing more things with it. And very often that is what will happen with kids when you're just reading to them. They will get ideas. It like a little light bulb will go on in their head, and they will start thinking to themselves, what can I do that's like that? Or how can I learn more about that? So that is just my most basic advice to you, is it is perfectly fine to just read to your kids these historical fictions, these biographies, these autobiographies. With your younger kids, the trade books, that is perfectly fine. If that is the season that you are at in your life, or even if that is just how you and your family prefer to learn, it's enough. So again, push the notion of what school has to look like out of your head, because try to model it on how you as an adult learn. We don't bring in hands-on activities for ourselves. We don't give ourselves writing assignments on things to help us learn. We read, we research the information, and that is enough most of the time. Now, sometimes you might want to bring some variety into your homeschool. Some kids and some adults might get a little bored just reading each and every day and not doing anything else. And that is perfectly understandable. As I said, each family is different. And we add extra things into our history. Now, one of the other ways that you can homeschool history is with unit studies. So you could choose a particular book, or you could choose a particular topic or time period that you want to learn about. And you can very often go online and find lots of free unit studies with lots of hands-on activities to go with them. I forgot what I was going to say. I've been doing that a lot lately. So actually, yeah, the whole thing that happened with my kids with Little House on the Prairie, that's what inspired me to write the Little House unit study that I wrote, because I saw all the fun things that my kids were doing, and I thought to myself, hey, you know what? That would make a really great unit study. So that is something else that you can do. Ask your kids what part of history you would like for them to learn about. My daughter, she's 16 now, but a couple years ago, she was really interested in World War II. So what I did was I found a bunch of trade books on that era, and I also had her read Number the Stars. I had her read The Book Thief. Those are all things that you can incorporate into your homeschool without having to pull any type of textbooks into it, or textbook lessons, or any of these schoolish things that a lot of times, very often, if you're planning on using living books, very often it's because you're trying to avoid the whole trying to look like school at home thing. And living books are very natural. It's a very holistic way for kids to learn. It just is something that happens. It holds their interest, and a lot of times they retain that information much better than if they're just reading it from a textbook. So yes, again, unit studies are another way that you can incorporate living books into your homeschool. Focus on one time period. Gather a bunch of trade books, maybe a historical fiction or two, a biography, and maybe some videos. And again, unit studies. I keep talking about unit studies because I love them. They give you all sorts of hands-on information for the things that you can use to enhance the learning that your kids are doing. And you can really do that with any type of book. It doesn't just have to be chapter books. Again, you could use the trade books like this for younger kids. If they are interested in something, very often it will spark learning. So when my kids and I were reading this book, it showed about how they made mummies. So my kids, they wanted to watch a cartoon video on how they made mummies. I know I've heard of people who actually go out and mummify chickens. And that is the great thing about these books, because they contain so much information. They contain so many ideas that you honestly do not need to have that textbook, even like the table of contents. You don't need to have that if you have a full plate of materials to use for a topic that you're using. But now that I mentioned the table of contents, I do want to point out that if you would like to have that reassurance that you're covering everything in a particular area, that is something else that you could totally do, is get a textbook for a topic or a time period that you want your kids to learn about, or that your kids want to learn about, and follow the table of contents by actually getting books from the library that have to do with that subheading. You know, for example, if your kids are learning about American history and one of the subheadings is the Civil War, get some trade books on the Civil War. Maybe get a biography. My kids love the historical fiction series, Dear America series. They really love that. You could have your kids watch lots of videos for the Revolutionary War era. There are the Liberties Kids videos, and most of this stuff you can find on YouTube for free. So this isn't any additional information, which is another perk of using Living Books for History, is that you do not have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a textbook that your kids probably aren't going to remember much from. You can honestly go to the library and for free, just borrow the books, read through them, and then you just take them back. And then you just have an endless amount of information coming in. So honestly, homeschooling history with Living Books is so much easier than many people think that it is. That is honestly, to me, the best way for kids to learn. Honestly, I have a car outside like burning rubber, but there's always stuff going on while I'm doing my videos. I live on a busy street and it's just like constant stuff going on, constant distractions. But anyway, so yes, but I'm going to say it again for the third time. Stop thinking of your homeschool as a school. That is the first thing that you need to do. Push that notion of what school looks like out the window, and just remember how much fun it is to read with your kids. Remember how much fun it is for your kids to read a book that they're interested in. You don't always have to make everything into a lesson, because very often if your kids are, if they're excited about what they're reading about, they are going to explore that information on their own. You just have to give them the opportunity to do it. And again, just a reminder, unit studies. Awesome. They are the perfect thing to go with Living Books. And I know you probably expected this step-by-step video on how to go about using Living Books for History. But again, it's honestly such a simple concept, and you just have to find ways to incorporate that into your own homeschool. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like what I do and would like to support me on Patreon, I would love if you would visit me there. I've got all sorts of neat rewards for my patrons there, and I hope you have a great day.